Today, we're going to have some fun talking to you about strengthening your cybersecurity from at risk to resilient. My name is Alyssa Parento. I'm a senior cybersecurity analyst and advisor at Field Effect. My background is from intelligence agencies. I spent about 20 years at the Communication Security Establishment, which is the Canadian version of the NSA. And now I've been working the last couple of years at Field Effect, where my primary job is to help small to medium enterprises on their cybersecurity journey through, education pieces like this webinar today, in the hopes that, through information, we can help enable everybody to make good decisions about their cybersecurity and their personal and professional life. And I am super psyched to have with us today Thomas Dunn. He's a strategic cybersecurity advisor here at Field Effect, and we've worked together in a past life as well. I'll let him introduce himself and get started.
Thanks very much, and thanks everybody for joining us. So as Alyssa mentioned, we have a long history of collaborating together in the cybersecurity domain and in cyber defense. Like Alyssa mentioned, in terms of her own background, I also have about a little over 20 years experience in cybersecurity. The bulk of that was also spent with the Communication Security Establishment. I spent some time as well with in government in Canada, with the Privy Council Office, with the Department of Industry, Innovation, Science, and Economic Development. That role was contributing to the development of Canada's national cybersecurity strategy. And prior to joining Field Effect a little over 2 years ago, I worked for the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians. And my role there in part was to review the government's framework for defending its own networks from cyber attack. So overall, you're going to hear us talk about cybersecurity and cyber resilience as a journey. So for me, my journey in learning about cybersecurity and cyber defense and resilience has been a little over 20 years. I would say that that journey will continue, and I look at it as continuing into the future. So I don't see myself yet as cyber self-actualized, but that is something that I continue to work towards. As Alyssa mentioned, we invite your comments, your questions in the chat, and we'll try to get to all of those. Any that we might not be able to answer in the discussion today, we'll look to do so afterwards in response to any questions you pose. And in the context of this presentation and discussion, really being about cyber resilience, understanding cyber risk, and things like that, we'd also invite you to feel free to share if there are particular areas or things that you are concerned about. So you might not have a question, but if there are things that keep you up at night or things that you worry about when it comes to defending yourself or your organization from cyber attack, please feel free to comment those themes in the chat, and we'll try to speak to those as well. So in terms of our agenda today, we're going to lead in a little bit with some discussion of what we see, what we view as cybersecurity and good cybersecurity. A little bit as well about why it's hard, in particular for small and medium organizations and the challenges that they face. We're going to talk a little bit about what it means to be at risk in this domain, at risk of cyber attack or compromise. And then in the theme of resilience, how do we achieve that? And how do we work towards it on an ongoing basis? And in that, a big part of that, we'll discuss the benefits of working with the right team, the right technology, and how to look at that from the context of organizations and their individual budgets and priorities. What is cybersecurity and why is it hard? Well, you've probably heard a lot in the environment about the importance of having a framework for your cybersecurity program. There's a lot of constant noise in the world about how, people and individuals and organizations should do, A, B, or C to improve their cybersecurity, do lots of things to defend against the latest threats that are being seen. According to the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, small and medium organizations are the most likely to face cyber threat activity in the form of cybercrime. And that often has immediate financial and privacy implications for those organizations, for the people that work there, and for the clients and communities that they serve. So in this context, it's no wonder that many organizations, especially small and medium businesses, wonder what they should do strategically about cybersecurity or tactically and how they can protect themselves and their clients from harm. When we think about cybersecurity and importantly, good cybersecurity and what it is, if you looked up a definition of cybersecurity, it would say something to the effect of, that it's protection of a computer or a computer system and its networks and data against unauthorized access or attack. Lots of sources have very detailed, rather more complicated definitions about protecting, integrity of your infrastructure and the digital information that you have. That it's about a body of the technologies you use, the processes and practices that you have in place to respond to a cyber attack or an incident, and really protecting your information and your networks against unauthorized access, so that what you can ensure is the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of your information. So those last three things that I mentioned, these are often called the CIA triad. So confidentiality is really about keeping your information private. Integrity is about ensuring that the information you have can't be altered by an unauthorized party. And availability is about ensuring that your services are accessible to the clients and the communities that you want and need to serve. So modern cybersecurity programs are becoming wise to incorporating privacy considerations for the data that they hold and safety considerations for the technology systems that they use and their reliability in providing online services. So in this context, broadly, cybersecurity is really an ongoing practice. So for us, and even in the business of providing cybersecurity and professional services, it's both a challenge and an opportunity. So when we think about it as something that's evergreen. It is a journey that's ongoing. It's about risk management. So identifying the risks that you have, implementing controls and security controls to reduce those risks, and then accepting risks that might be residual. So ensuring that the controls and practices that you put in place have reduced risks to the lowest amount possible for you. The benefits that come out of having a good cybersecurity program, of course, there's several. Business continuity, the main one. Ideally preventing or minimizing any interruption to your ability to conduct business and provide services to your clients. Data protection is another one. And that can include the protection of both your business and confidential business information, but also personal information that you might hold in your organization. Having a good cybersecurity program will also contribute to having increased market opportunities because you will be a safe and reliable entity with whom to conduct business. In that, a good cybersecurity program is also going to limit either financial or potential legal liability that an organization can face in the event of suffering a cyber attack or a compromise and a data breach. So we'll get into a little bit more of those elements as we go through today. And next, we're going to turn to a little bit on specific challenges for small and medium enterprise.
The concept of accepting residual risk, I think that a lot of people think that you have to strive for kind of perfection. And could you just speak a little bit to how you would manage residual risk or document it, or what would be the process there?
To identify an acceptable level of residual risk, it is a process. So it really involves identifying the risks and understanding the risks that an organization faces, and then correlating those elements to the protections and security controls, policies and procedures that you might have in place. Because each one of those elements ideally will mitigate either all or a portion of the risks that you face. So, and in many instances, the residual risk that remains may be acceptable in part because it's unlikely. So the ability to be resilient, and we'll talk about this some more, is in reducing that risk, not because an event can be 100% prevented or that a system that you might have would be 100% perfect, but ideally the likelihood of an event is reduced and your ability to withstand an event is increased. The challenges that organizations face when it comes to cybersecurity and defending themselves from attack are largely the same, regardless of an organization's size. But the challenge for small and medium businesses is really one of scale. Smaller businesses have fewer resources and less in-house expertise to manage the challenge. And they often have less capacity to weather that significant incident if it happens. And they may be less likely to have a plan in place ahead of time to respond. So in effect, the cybersecurity challenges, while significant for all organizations, can be more significant for small and medium enterprises. When we think about the space and the domain of cybersecurity, it's an adversarial environment. So by that, I mean that threat actors or malicious cyber actors, their intent and their effort is on actively defeating the controls that you have put in place to protect your systems and your data. So risk management practices need to evolve as the techniques of adversaries and threat actors evolve as well. So the challenge in this space is one where small teams with, in some cases, small budgets face really high demand on being able to adapt in this kind of ongoing environment. So it's a combination of adversarial risk, some technical complexity in the domain of information technology, makes it a challenging environment for businesses to operate. So we often hear that cybersecurity expertise can be difficult to find and difficult to retain. Sometimes we hear that clients may not understand the cybersecurity threats to their systems. So as a result, it can be more difficult to implement appropriate and prioritized solutions. And often we hear that clients are after, of course, the right people with the right skills, but importantly, for the right money. When we talk about and we hear about risks to business continuity, here both media and industry reports have presented a lot of cases of cyber attack victims across industry sectors, where what they face in many cases is an interruption to their operations. So it comes with cost. Those kinds of attacks can present risks to intellectual property. That can include, for some organizations, proprietary research information or product and sales information. But importantly, also attacks can present risks to personal information. That can impact both your employees, but also the clients with whom you work. So that can implicate financial data, banking information, credit card data. A lot of that is of primary interest to threat actors in this space. So what does it mean to be at risk? Well, I mentioned earlier that according to the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, that small and medium organizations are the most likely to face cyber threat activity. This is cyber crime that can present immediate financial and privacy implications. Well, it's also been advised by the Cyber Centre and others that ransomware is almost certainly the most disruptive form of cybercrime facing Canadians. Cyber criminals are deploying this kind of technique and evolving it in a growing and sophisticated ecosystems. And we know that these are going to continue to adapt because what they're doing is trying to maximize their profits as an enterprise. But aside from the financial cost of a ransomware event itself, as I mentioned previously, this kind of event can stop an operation from continuing with important systems. So it can damage or destroy data, can reveal sensitive information. This is all in addition to imposing costs related to the time to recover from an attack. But we see this kind of context in discussion with our clients as a primary area of concern and an expressed desire to do what they can to avoid being in that kind of situation. So there's some baseline principles that apply across the board to organizations, both big and small. So for example, you're more likely to be at risk if you don't know what information you have or that you hold and why it might be valuable to a threat actor. You might be at risk if you don't know where you store your information, or if you don't understand the threats that you're facing in this context. And lastly, you might be at risk if you don't track and monitor the technology systems that you use, nor the activity that happens on your network. So for example, who is connected to your network? What might they have access to? How do they have that access? And are you in a position where you can capture and log and retain that information so that you know what has happened and when, with what information, and by whom? So understanding your risk. So as I'm sure many of you are familiar, the way that we use the internet and connected technologies is continuing to evolve. Many of us, like myself, we work in hybrid fashions or entirely remotely. This is presenting new risks because it expands the threat surface of organizations as they provide connectivity for employees to connect remotely and, of course, to their clients. So we need to know how our systems are being used, by whom, and from where. So it's a bit of the classic who, when, why, with what, and how. But a threat surface itself, so this is the sum of the threats minus the mitigation actions that an organization will take, this is your threat surface. So this image that you see here of the bullseye with these graphics, this is effectively, you can think of this as the size of the target that you represent to a threat actor. So understanding the types and size of connections and touch points that you have to the internet and the world is going to help you understand all of the threats that you might encounter and where they're going to come from. So when we understand all of these threats, we can take action to mitigate them. So this is understanding your risk because you understand your threat surface. In sum, minimizing that threat surface is going to result in greater resilience to cyber attack. So understanding your risk in three broad areas means that you would understand that you know that you're not immune from cyber attack or from the interest and attention of cyber threat actors. You'll understand your risk by working to continually understand your threat surface and the way that your surface might evolve. In particular, as you might employ new technologies or work with new people and new solutions, that's going to change the nature of your threat surface over time. So we're going to dig a little bit more into the topic of resilience next, and then talk about how, in our view, you're not alone in facing this challenge, nor in dealing with it and trying to take advantage of this opportunity to increase resilience.
Do you want to speak to how the threat surface can evolve even when you're still you're using the same technology, but just because the technology itself, you're not necessarily adding a new system to your network, but there's constant, we're constantly finding vulnerabilities in that. Do you want to speak to that a bit?
Technologies themselves, we may use the same systems, but increasingly, of course, we are collaborating with others who are providing services. So the way that we use them and the way that those companies or partners might update their services can at times introduce new vulnerabilities. So the challenge in this space in terms of having an ongoing understanding of your threat surface is the need to have an understanding of how the technologies you use, even if you don't replace them, that they themselves may be updated and changed over time. And where possible, that they should be kept as up to date as possible, such that, if an application or program that you use can be configured to allow automatic updates and software or application updates and operating system updates, that those are critically important to enable. Doing so ideally reduces the threat surface over time, but on an ongoing basis. So how do we achieve resilience? The kind of things that we've been talking about today get after some of the themes that a lot of cybersecurity experts and authorities have acknowledged. And that is that it's not a matter of if, but often a question of when an organization is going to suffer a cyber attack. And certainly that attempts at cyber attack are continuous and they are persistent. So therefore, resilient organizations work over time to prepare themselves for that kind of eventuality in order to be able to reduce the impact of any attack should one happen. So what kinds of things make an organization resilient? Well, a resilient organization is adaptable. So that means that a resilient organization is going to prepare for an incident. They're going to respond to incidents as they happen in an effort to ensure continued business operations. Resilient organizations are going to defend against malicious actions, and in doing so, they're going to recover and work to recover efficiently from a cyber attack. Importantly, resilience in our view is not one size fits all. Ideally, everyone is resilient, but not everyone is going to be resilient in the same way. So we recognize that resilience is not the same for all organizations. It does involve understanding your risks. It does involve, as we discussed earlier, defining and documenting a risk tolerance based on your environment and establishing an acceptable level of resilience and risk for your organization. But very much it can depend on your size, on what your environment is like, the kinds of technologies or solutions and applications you have in place. It can depend on your industry sector. That can influence the kinds of threats that you would be subject to, or the business vertical that you might operate in, and the partnerships and relationships that you have, because sometimes they can result in connections between your organization and others in terms of connections and third-party relationships and networks. When we talk about resilience, we like to talk about four concepts: monitoring first, identifying risks and mitigation second, prioritizing and implementing additional controls third, and then continuously improving. So monitoring first. This is about addressing security control gaps with excellent monitoring. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about why we believe that's so important as the first step. Identifying risks and mitigations. This is a step that you can leverage the monitoring that you have in place in order to both find the gaps that you might have, but then also to help fill them and reduce any vulnerabilities that are there. Prioritizing and implementing additional controls. This is about reinforcing your defenses. It's about building new policies or processes and procedures where they might be required, but also knowing that in terms of moving on this journey towards resilience, it's not necessarily possible to do everything at once. And we recognize that a feeling that I need to do this all right now can be overwhelming, and it can contribute to part of the challenge of thinking that this is an insurmountable challenge. Our effort in working with our clients is to try and demystify some of that, to simplify it, and importantly, to prioritize where investments can be spent on the most important controls and to address those things first to fill the most significant gaps wherever they exist. Continuously improving, we recognize this is an ongoing journey. It's a problem that will continue to evolve. And so it's not a one-time, one fix, one solution situation, but rather one that we will continue to adapt and continue to respond to. Sometimes a common refrain that is heard is that, well, look, the systems we're responsible for are complicated, or they're never going to be secure enough in this kind of environment with the types of persistent and constant threats that organizations face. In our view, that type of sentiment is precisely the reason why monitoring first is the most important first step out of the gate. It's also, we believe, the most cost-effective approach. So, for example, deploying monitoring technology inside your network. So thinking about how your network is structured, where your information might travel in and out, and the endpoints that you have, things like workstations or laptops, things like that. That kind of monitoring is going to root out any existing bad things that are currently in your environment and reduce the likelihood of any new bad things getting in. So this alone is a significant step and an increase in resilience, that ongoing real-time monitoring. In effect, you can think of it as buying time in order to implement other new controls or additional security measures and practices in that prioritized way to then continue to raise the bar and increase the resilience for your organization. The things that follow in terms of identifying risks and prioritizing other things, these are part of what you may have heard of before and what we call a defense in-depth approach to resilience, and we're going to dig into that a little bit more. Earlier, we had presented that threat surface bullseye graphic when we talked about understanding your risk. So defense in-depth is about applying layers of protection to make the bullseye on your organization as tiny as possible. So the message in this kind of image is straightforward. Effectively, no single intervention, and Alyssa touched on this a little bit in terms of, is anything that we do going to be 100% perfect? Well, no single intervention is going to be perfect at preventing a cyber attack. Multiple layers of protection improve success and increase resilience. So defense in depth, in our view, involves your people, it involves your policies, and it involves your technology, all of which we'll talk about those themes. But briefly, this is highly engaged when we think about things like cybersecurity training and incident response preparation. In the area of policies, these are things that engage your internal strategies, the plans or procedures that you have for the day-to-day conduct of your business and its protection. And technology, these are the solutions that you have in place. Everything from the antivirus that you might use, or specific email protection systems you might have in place, or the manner in which your users or your clients must authenticate to your systems and your applications. All of those technology solutions are layers within a defense in depth approach. So overall, when we think about resilience and we think about defense in depth, we're talking about the ability to take a punch and to still be standing. So the purpose of a good cybersecurity program and cyber resilience is not to avoid that. It's about withstanding the impact of it, given the likelihood that it's going to happen and that cyber threat actors are going to be attempting it and targeting you based on the fact that the information that you have, the data that you hold, presents a value opportunity for them. So where do you start? Ask for help. It is out there. As an organization, we'd love to talk more to you specifically about your specific concerns and help you to plan a roadmap on moving forward. You can, we believe, work within your budget. So solutions are possible. First, assessing and understanding your threat surface is going to help you prioritize where to invest your resources so that you can get the greatest return on your investments. The first step is often the hardest, of course. As I mentioned, resilience isn't an end state. It's an ongoing, repeatable process. But every additional step you take is going to increase your cyber resilience. So making resilience manageable, I was speaking about the people, the policies, technology. Working from those concepts, we believe is a way to make resilience manageable for an organization. So those three themes, people, policies, and technology. So the people, of course, are the heart of your organization. Their role is crucial to your ability to successfully defend against a cyber attack. And cybersecurity awareness is critical in that area. So people, they're the strength at the core of every organization, but we know that they're also a primary target of cyber threat actors. So phishing is a common threat tactic that for threat actors is a successful one, and business email compromises are a very common thing that we see in incident response in working with clients and new organizations that recognize that their people are a target. So resilience is going to grow for organizations when their people are informed about risks and threats and then empowered in their own roles to protect the organization and its information and thus themselves. So in practice, that can mean things like employees receiving training about cybersecurity and how it is put into practice for your organization within the first few weeks of their employment, and then again on recurring bases. It can also include things like senior leaders in your organization undertaking annual cybersecurity awareness training tailored to leaders and decision makers. In the policy space, of course, we know that planning and policies influence good practice. So as a result, cybersecurity planning and policies are of fundamental importance to improving resilience. In the policy space, these can set minimum standards for things like roles and responsibilities. They can provide direction for employees related to cybersecurity awareness and best practice. So for example, organizations might have a password policy stipulating that employees cannot reuse passwords across their accounts and that they must employ multi-factor authentication wherever it's available. Cybersecurity plans and procedures, they set the baseline for day-to-day processes and procedures. So an example in this area is an organization that would have an incident response plan. These kinds of plans are an integral part of cybersecurity maturity and resilience because they provide guidance for coordinated, effective, and timely response efforts. They're going to help minimize disruption to the high-value systems you have, defining the roles and responsibilities of who's going to respond to an incident in your organization or any external stakeholders you might work with, along with providing guidance for both internal and external communications and reporting that can be a big part of responding to a cyber incident. In terms of technology, these, of course, are the technical security solutions that reinforce your information management and security practices. So, for example, ensuring that for the information you hold, that access permissions are in place and controls are in place to data such as the documents that you have or emails, whether those bits of information are stored in applications or databases, and using things like role-based access controls, and as I mentioned, multi-factor authentication, ensuring that it's enabled and required for all accesses to your systems. Growing resilience with the right partner. We believe that resilience can be increased and achieved by working with a great partner. In our view, it's a purposeful and collaborative exercise. So leading from those themes of people and policies and technology, finding the right team is very much about people. And especially for smaller organizations, it's about people who may be part of external supports that you can add to your team to support you on your journey. So this is really what it means to grow your team from the outside in. by working with an external team to build up your knowledge, your awareness, and your resilience. Working with a team and good people is going to help demystify the challenge of good cybersecurity. So our suggestion and our recommendation would be to look for a team that complements your organization and the team that you have by helping you build and enhance your current cybersecurity posture, to simplify things and to prioritize the process of finding where you are and then working to where you need to be. This is going to help you identify where to start. And from there, being able to know that you'll be working towards doing the right things at the right time and based on the knowledge of that starting point. So doing the right things, this is going to be about building in the processes and strong technology choices to reinforce your policies and processes. Effectively, those technology solutions are going to backstop your people as another one of those layers in that defense in-depth approach. So the objective here in our view and what we would recommend is looking for a technology that's not a burden for your organization, but one that's helpful. So it's not an annoyance. It's something that empowers you and helps you understand in clear and concise ways what's happening in your environment, why it's important for you to know that it's happening, and critically, what to do about it. So our suggestion and recommendation would be to keep these kinds of expectations in mind anytime you might be engaging with a potential vendor or supplier in terms of cybersecurity companies that you would be considering. Is there a resilience to-do list? You may have seen or heard of like the top 10 lists, top 5, top 8, top 20 things to do when it comes to protecting your network. Well, we would suggest that yes, there's a to-do list, but it's not necessarily a top 20. So first, get started and get monitoring. So implementing monitoring in your environment is going to be the most cost-effective way to protect your organization. Ensuring that monitoring includes your endpoints, so your computers, laptops, servers, that it includes your network. So that's the data that's coming in and out of your environment. And importantly, that monitoring would include a cloud presence if you have one. So a lot of our lives exist there now. A lot of organizations, of course, have transitioned or are in the process of transitioning their operations into the cloud. That monitoring is going to help you in thinking of the next thing on the to-do list in this cycle. Assessment. So assessing your current posture is going to mean understanding the information technology that you have, your information management practices, identifying your existing cybersecurity controls and the protections that you might already have in place. With that, you're going to be able to move to implementation. So that assessment is going to help you discover and highlight two important things. Firstly, the strengths that you already have in your existing practices so that there's good things happening. We need to keep doing those things, but also to help you uncover and examine any gaps that might be in place so that you can close them. You can implement new controls and new practices. That might mean a prioritized implementation plan. So that's the kind of thing where advisors in an organization like Field Effect would work with you to prioritize the next steps for your organization based on the most significant gaps that have been identified. So that is going to help you develop, where required, new policies, new procedures, or to identify opportunities for training and educating your staff. Importantly, the last step in this resilience to-do list is to repeat the process to ensure that on an ongoing basis, you're trying to maintain that awareness of your threat surface, how it's evolving, and thus how your security mitigations need to evolve and adapt in response. So in summary, that's what I wanted to share with you today, and happy to take any questions or discuss any themes that would be of interest to you, whether it is concepts of cybersecurity and good cybersecurity, why it's a challenge, what it means to be at risk in this domain, and how steps that can be taken to try and achieve resilience.
We do just have a couple questions, Thomas.
Sure.
So one, so it sounds like somebody's just started kind of working on the policies for the organization, and just wanted to know if we had like a list of must-have policies or what we think are the core ones that every company should have.
I think that policies, when we think of policies as one of the legs in there with policy, with people, policies, and technology, policies is very much an umbrella. So within that can be cybersecurity strategies or plans, can be the procedures or guidance documents that you might have for your organization. But if I had to suggest sort of a prioritized focus area of things that are important, the first one would be having an incident response plan. So setting guidance and structure around the things that are going to be critically important in responding to an incident should one happen. Related to that, though, in terms of being that sort of preparedness in advance and increasing resilience, we would work, and we do work with all of our clients to try and identify if they have gaps in their policy framework as it exists today. So we would focus on things like password policies, ensuring that guidance is in place around what it means to have a good password or a passphrase, how to create one and store one, the importance of not reusing passwords either in professional or personal circumstances. We would focus on things like information management policies. So really documenting the type of information that an organization holds, where they store it and how it can be accessed. But importantly, also understanding whether or not the nature of an organization's data means that they may be subject to specific regulatory or compliance frameworks, either around data retention or data or disposal of data that they hold. And importantly, around reporting that could be required in the event of a data breach or a cyber incident. So, I mean, in sum, I think I would say that for each organization, our approach would be to work with you on a one-to-one basis to understand, the nature of the environment that you currently have, whether existing policies are in place, and then to build out a framework from there in order to fill any gaps that might exist in the policy space.
So we have another question. What is the single most at-risk daily computer operation by employees that puts the organization at risk?
If it were a risk that were really at the interface between like an organization and its employees, my first reaction would be email. Email is a significant source of attention from cyber threat actors, and as a result, potential business email compromises. So, having effective email practices in place, is a really strong way to try and prevent or reduce the impact of an incident that might generate from that kind of vulnerability. So, practices in that space, would mean things like having monitoring in place for email access to know whether or not suspicious activity is underway, ensuring that users have strong password practices in place, and multi-factor authentication. That second step of authentication to email and using strong factors for authentication is a really effective way to prevent a compromise, because in circumstances where a user may have their password or their credentials, their username and password credential pair compromised, a threat actor is still not going to be able to get in if they can't get past a second factor or multi-factor authentication step.
Right now, I do have one more question left. We are currently working on our data/information management policy and struggling a bit. Do we have any tips to offer? That's something all of our clients struggle with, I feel like, to be frank, like everybody, everybody struggles with this,
Yeah, I mean, I think the pillars of a good information management practice and information management policy are going to set out from the get-go, some principles around the fact that, that your organization is going to have information management controls and security controls in place, that an organization is going to identify and document the kinds of data that it holds, where that information is stored, and importantly, the access controls that are going to be required to be able for any user to have access to it. So, for example, that would mean identifying whether or not your organization may hold personally identifiable information, or PII, as it's often referred to. Do you have sensitive business or confidential business information, be it related to research or products, sales plans, or other things like that deserve additional protection? So it's knowing what you have, where you keep it and how you interact with it. That's going to help you, I think, understand the kinds of protections that would be advisable, whether or not certain types of data would demand additional protective measures, both for access or for sharing or transmitting data, such as ensuring that that data would be encrypted either wherever it is stored or both where it's stored and when it is shared to anyone. And with that, would also inform your practice in terms of how long you might need to retain data, the means with which you should be properly disposing of your data, and then ensuring that you're aware of, based on the jurisdictions where you operate, whether or not you're subject to either legal or regulatory compliance frameworks or data breach notification requirements from certain authorities, and be it at federal, state, or provincial levels. But with that, I mean, I think, and this would apply across the board. I think for any organizations that would have questions about how to approach that kind of thing, the Field Effect would certainly be more than happy to have a follow-on conversation.
We've answered all the questions. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming today. We super appreciate your time. Thank you so much, Thomas, for the presentation. That was awesome.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining.